the 10th episode of our podcast,
where we drink tea and navigate the balance between school and personal life.
I'm Sophia Safe.
And I'm Sophia Curry.
And this is Sip and Spill.
Welcome back to the Tea Journal.
The topic we'll be touching on today is dealing with romantic relationships.
So, I think first thing we can talk about is communication efforts.
Okay, go on.
So, when you're in a relationship, growing up, I've always been taught communication is, oh my god, we always say this, communication is key. So, that's one big thing, because if you don't communicate with each other, then one, you're not going to know how the other person is feeling. And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is more long-term, like facing. I don't know what the right word is for that.
I'm not sure either.
It's more geared toward long-term relationships, I think. But I think we can also talk about, short-term relationships too. And if you're just kind of, for me personally, I can't see having a relationship without it being long-term. Because I'm
meant to be long-term.
Right. Versus...
I can't see myself get into a relationship knowing that it's not going to last.
Yeah. So, but there are definitely people who date just to feel it out, and, that's okay. But if you're more long-term, communication is important.
Even short-term, I feel like in any relationship ever, communication is important in setting boundaries.
But especially long-term, because you guys are making the
effort,
decision and effort to commit to each other.
Right.
So, communication efforts are really important. How do you connect with your partner, and how do you guys communicate? And I think that's hard depending on the person. Like, I definitely experienced that when I was in my relationship. Like, I'm a huge talker and he wasn't. And, one of the things we're going to talk about is codependency. So,
yeah,
if you want to read the blurb.
So, in a codependent relationship, there tends to be a severe imbalance of power. Often, one person may be giving much more time, energy, and focus to the other person, who consciously or unconsciously takes advantage of the situation in order to maximize their needs and desires.
I also want to reiterate again that, like in episode 8, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is researched, and we will put the links to our research in the descriptions. That specific description, I guess, it was from the Cleveland Clinic.
Yep.
So, signs of a codependent relationship.
Okay, so I feel like the first sign would be you feel like you need to save them from themselves.
I can definitely relate. So, Sophia knows I can relate to this.
Yeah.
I was in a codependent relationship, and we talked about this in a little bit in episode 7 with Natalie and Lima. And Natalie pointed out to me, I always considered myself a relatively healthy person, and it's not saying that I'm not. However, my personality tends to be very giving. So in this relationship, I was giving it my all, and I did not see that it became codependent.
And I feel like you didn't see that it became visible that you were giving a lot more than they were.
And I think that's because, you don't realize it because, you see a lot of how much they give to you as well. And I'm not trying to shame him in any way.
Absolutely
he gave me so much, and he definitely put so much effort into our relationship, and I'm immensely grateful for that. But I did feel like, that sort of you need to save them from themselves. Not really necessarily saving them, but I really wanted to help him improve.
Right. So I feel like in a codependent relationship, that partner would take on the, persona or, the role of a caretaker.
Oh, for sure. Yes. And I definitely think I did that. I feel like, and one of the things I talked about in my therapy sessions when I was still in a relationship, she was like, you're acting like his mother almost. And
yes,
I did realize that, and I have very motherly tendencies, even with my friends, and that's something I need to rein in a bit. And I think that's just, that's just me trying to care. However, it's not always healthy, although it does seem like it should be. it's not. And so, you're trying, so, you maybe step in and you're trying to guide them along to, help them better themselves into more positive solutions. And their behavior is redeemable at first, and you would do anything to see your partner succeed. However, it's on the other person to make real and lasting change, so you can only do so much.
Absolutely.
And it says, ultimately this becomes a one-sided relationship. And I experienced that a lot.
Yeah.
Although I did see him put in efforts to change, but with certain things, like, deep down, I did know. I was like, this isn't something I can fix. And I think that was really hard. So
I feel like that goes into like
mm-hmm.
you wanting to change who your partner is.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like not in a way that like is a small like something you both are hung up over something small, but more like a fundamental difference in like character or beliefs.
Yeah, and I think that again goes back into you can't change them. Change is a word I dance around because while I was in this relationship, the both of us didn't want to change for the other person in terms of I don't want to change myself to be someone else for you. Like, yes. I want to be authentically me and I want you to accept me for me. And so I don't want to say change, but more you want to see them grow into a better version of themselves.
Absolutely. I feel like
I
feel like when you are in a codependent relationship, you're trying to convince them to be like you in a way.
I think so, or just something that flows better with you.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could just be like you guys are just so attached to like I don't know how to explain it, but you're just so attached to I think wanting to do better and get better for each other that sometimes one person puts in more effort than the other.
Right.
And you're kind of it's like okay, so there's a really good example here. It says, say your partner is a homebody, but you might like to go out, and if they want to stay home, right? But eventually they, you want to convince them to come out, right?
Have fun.
Sometimes you're forcing yourself to go out. You might be forcing yourself to stay home so that you can be with them. Or you might be trying to force them to come out with you and be like, just try it. It's okay.
Absolutely. And the truth is you can't change other people if they're unwilling to make that change. And also you probably shouldn't try to change your partner to be more like you.
Yeah, I agree. So, another thing is taking time out for self-care makes you feel selfish.
Right. I feel like that seems a lot like you are trying to take care of them, but you don't have enough, like, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mm-hmm. Which we said way back in episode 1.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's true, and I think that's kind of where you, like, if you start feeling like that, that's kind of, like, I feel like that's the telltale sign that it's, like, oh, maybe this isn't good, because, like, that's where I feel like that's probably one of the most toxic things on this list.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, your partner should be supporting you and allowing you to take time for yourself because that's important if they care about you.
Absolutely. And some questions that come with this one specifically is something like, does it feel wrong to be without them?
Right.
Does it feel off to do things that you used to love doing before you met them? Can you spend a couple of hours outside your comfort zone without relying on their presence for self-care? I feel like it's less that you don't have time for self-care, but more like you're relying on them to be caring and them to be your only form of self-care, whereas self-care comes in many different forms, especially in taking time out for yourself and to understand yourself as who you are.
Definitely. And then we have, it's difficult to explain how you're feeling about your relationship. So to elaborate on it, when asked about how things are going with your relationship, is it hard to define what's positive or negative? Do you have mixed feelings about all of it?
This might be because you're focused on the other person in a relationship, that you're not spending a lot of time focusing on your feelings.
Yes. So I think personally, if, to get a personal connection, I think we weren't entirely codependent. We were definitely getting there. But I think I was at least aware enough to recognize some of these signs and recognize that they weren't bad. Like, for example, the self-care. I knew that it was wrong, that if it felt, selfish to take self-care, I was like, I know that's not okay. And I was like, I shouldn't have to feel bad for taking time off for myself.
Absolutely.
And taking care of myself. And, I definitely could point out positive and negative things about my relationship. And I was like, I didn't really have mixed feelings. I just had mixed feelings about certain things, so I could see it leading there. And then something else that's here says this, all of that might be happening because you're focused on the relationship, which is what Sophia was saying.
Yes.
So you might be avoiding your own problems or feelings and replacing them with a high that comes from simply satisfying your partner.
Which is quite literally a double-edged sword.
Yeah. And that's hard. And I think that, plays into, you feel anxious when you don't hear from them. Because, that they're ultimately where you're getting, like, you're drawing all your energy and happiness from, and that's not good.
I mean, if you find yourself panicking or thinking of, like, worst case scenarios during large gaps of time when you're not together, or if you're constantly reaching for your phone or reaching out to them, it's probably because you've become so reliant on your partner for that satisfaction.
Yeah, and I think that's a really tricky line, because I think, some might just be really excited and you might just really be, like, waiting for a text because you like talking to them, but I think that's when you have to take a step back and really reflect on yourself and your relationship and kind of see, like, oh, how do I feel right now? Like, am I excited, or am I, like, really nervous and anxious and, like, scared? And that goes into, you have trouble being alone. So can you sit by yourself, comfortably without feeling like you need to reach out to this person? Sometimes it doesn't feel good to sit with your own thoughts, because it's easier to pour your focus into another person and avoid the things that bother you than to focus on all the things you need to do to improve your current situation. So
that's a big one.
That's huge. I think codependency is something big that we're talking about, right now. It's difficult because, in a healthy relationship, you do want to help the other person better themselves. But again, we want to be careful about, are they doing the same for you?
Absolutely. Or if it's a one-sided relationship where it's you putting in all the effort and they're reaping the benefits.
Right. And to play devil's advocate, say someone's listening who might be on the other side. But they're, I'm not saying people are doing this on purpose.
Absolutely not, no.
Listening to this, do you hear yourself saying, oh gosh, maybe I'm making my partner feel this way because, I can see they've maybe expressed, that it feels selfish to take time alone, or that they're afraid of not being with me or whatever, or, they don't feel as if I'm putting as much effort. And, if you really do care and you're like, I don't want, like, my partner to feel that way, how can you, change this behavior? So maybe this is helping point out some behaviors that you might be doing that, could be contributing to this problem versus something that you're experiencing.
And then this, again, goes back into communication and asking your partner if they feel this way, or asking your partner, how might I mitigate this?
And then we'll read a couple more here. We won't go too into it, but you can, in the link that we provide, you can read more. You routinely cancel plans to spend time with your partner. Your space doesn't feel like it's yours. You feel like maybe you ask for too much. Their behavior escalates when you try to set healthy boundaries.
And we talked about boundaries actually in previous episodes, and how important it is to trust each other's boundaries and to respect each other's boundaries.
Agreed. In episode 7, we were talking about, the people in relationships most often become, your support system. And that's okay. Like, you definitely want to lean on them, because in a relationship, you're becoming more committed to each other. So you do want that. But also, boundaries, again, like we were saying, are super important because everybody has their limit.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you've attempted to communicate and resolve issues by setting up healthy boundaries and your partner's behavior escalates or grows worse in spite of your attempts, this is a surefire sign that their needs takes precedent over your own. So
this
that's
behavior,
dangerous.
yeah, and this behavior especially could lead to like severe feelings of resentment or regret, which creates a perpetual, unending pattern of distress for both people.
Mm-hmm. You can get out of a codependent. I think it goes both ways. So I think it takes acceptance from both parties
Mm-hmm.
and seeing this and going, gosh, I don't want to be like that.
Absolutely.
And then,
So
go for it.
So how would you save a codependent relationship?
Get a trusted outside perspective.
Okay.
So
So are you saying like you would turn to your family or friends for advice?
yeah, I mean, anybody, I think.
Like your support system?
Yes, your support system. Again, key. Support systems are major here. So, you know, but I think the other thing you can kind of, when you're going in with yourself and between you and your partner, sit down and really think about like these behaviors and then, you know, oh gosh, what is the word?
Like re-examine your like value system?
Yes,
Like
but
think
also,
about.
oh my lord, it starts with a C. It's like on the tip of my tongue. It'll come to me. You know, but yes, check in with yourself, re-examine your values. So what are your core values that drive what you do? Honesty, that's like, these are all quality characteristics that you want and you're going to emphasize in your life.
Okay, so for example, if you value honesty, that's going to be a quality characteristic that you're going to emphasize in nearly every aspect of your life.
Yes.
And virtually every relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So what you would do is make a list of your core values and ask yourself, where have I made sacrifices?
Right.
What am I taking responsibility for here? How am I feeling about myself? How am I feeling about my career or my schooling?
And I just got the word compromise.
Compromise.
So it's not even just compromise. Compromise doesn't always mean equal.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean I give something, you take something back. Although, in the grand scheme of things, if one person may be sacrificing something in a healthy way, keep that in mind, for the other person. So, you know, where can you meet in the middle? So, like, if we were to go all the way back to where we were saying homebody versus, you know,
life of the party.
Life of the party, someone who likes to go out.
Mm-hmm.
Where can you make a compromise so that both people don't feel like they're constantly trying to please the other person by doing what the other person likes, and saying, can we create a system of compromising? Say, hey, this day maybe we both try to go out, and this day we can stay in, and if you really aren't feeling it, that's okay, and I'll respect that.
Absolutely.
And then creating a timeline of your relationship. So often people who are codependent will exhibit patterns of behavior across different relationships over time.
So by journaling about your past relationship, or even just thinking about them and revisiting some of the things that worked and didn't work, you can try and determine if you're repeating patterns of behavior in past relationships.
Yes, so this can help you better get to know yourself and how you act in relationships, and see whether or not you constantly fall into codependent relationships, you know, on both sides of the table, whether or not you're the person who may be the more attached one or the detached one.
Mm-hmm. And so that comes with setting healthy boundaries,
which we touched on again, and I think that also goes back to compromise, and compromise is key, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Compromise is setting those healthy boundaries and respecting that the other person may not be able to do this, or that you might need to try and give more.
Absolutely.
And that's super important. Oof.
And then, of course, there are signs that you should leave. So if your relationship ever becomes dangerous or abusive, either physically or verbally, you should seek immediate help and find a way to end that relationship.
Yes, for sure. Otherwise, only you can decide how much you're willing to put up with before you walk away.
So it's really up to the level of danger you're in, and if this person that you're with is not, like,
resistant
to change, or they're not benefiting you.
Right.
It should be mutually beneficial to have them in your support system.
And I think that's where also you can analyze how much are you gaining from this person versus how much you're giving them, and vice versa. And then I think this plays into another thing that's super important: trust and respect.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier on, I think a couple episodes ago, I was saying when you're like in a support system, when you're building that, I come from a place where trust and respect is given at first. You know, it might not be like super like in-depth trust, like you trust them with your deepest, darkest secrets, but you trust them with you and your personality and, you know, some things until they give you a reason not to. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, especially in a relationship, because when you get into a relationship, you make that commitment to each other to respect one another and, you know, not hurt the other person. And unless they've given you a reason not to be to be distrustful, you know, trust and respect should be there.
Absolutely.
So, how does one give trust in the beginning of a relationship?
So, I feel like, honestly, this goes for throughout a relationship as well, but open communication, consistency and reliability, mm-hmm. transparency, demonstrating empathy, and setting and respecting boundaries, and apologizing and forgiveness.
So I think, you know, our mantra for this week, compromise and boundaries are key.
Yes.
Super important. You know, because I think everybody knows about communication already, because we've harped on this in literally, like, I think all 9 episodes before.
Yeah, we love communication here.
We do, but I don't think people value communication enough. And I think communication is also super detached because of social media and everything that's going on. And so although we think we are so connected and so linked by having everything at our fingertips, we don't realize how detached we've actually become from the people right in front of us. So again, to connect on communication, by fostering open communication, consistency, transparency, empathy, respect for boundaries, the ability to apologize and forgive, and vulnerability, you can create a strong foundation of trust.
Remember that trust takes time to develop, but the efforts invested in building it will contribute to a lasting and meaningful connection.
Mm-hmm. Ultimately, a relationship built on trust is more likely to withstand adversity, creating a bond that enriches the lives of both people.
Speaking of bonds, you know what can help them?
Love languages.
Love languages.
I am very into this whole concept.
Me too.
Although, however, I'm still kind of struggling to figure mine out.
Me as well, honestly. I feel like I love very openly.
Yeah, me too.
And I love to love with other people's love languages.
Me too.
And I feel like that's really important. Loving someone how they love to be loved. Yes.
So this is going into putting in effort for the other person. So just to list them off, the love languages are words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, receiving gifts, and I think that's it. Yeah. So, you know, there are tons of quizzes out there that you can take to figure it out.
We also have a couple questions listed. So I think a lot of people know what these are, but I think we're going to explain them a little bit.
Yeah.
So in terms of words of affection,
yes.
Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So words of affirmation / affection would be, you know, does it feel good when your partner says, like, oh, you look good today, or, you know, thank you for everything you do, and I love you, and, you know, affirming words that, you know, show that they care about you and appreciate you.
Absolutely.
And when this is someone's primary love language, you know, they enjoy these words and encouragement, and that's how they, you know, they feel they receive love the most, and that's where they really feel it. And then it goes into quality time.
So someone with this love language values your full presence when you're together. They feel most loved if you give them your undivided attention and spend time together in meaningful and interactive ways. This might mean putting down the cell phone, or what this means, really, putting down the cell phone, turning off the computer, making eye contact, and thoughtfully interacting and actively listening.
Yeah, and I want to get into that a little more. That could be, you know, going to places that your partner, you know, you guys really enjoy, or meaningful places like, you know, where your first date might have been.
Or where you first met.
Right. So quality time is something you really are just focusing on that other person. And there doesn't necessarily need to be gifts or anything of the sort, but just being there with that person is really important.
Absolutely.
And then physical touch. So a person with physical touch as their primary love language feels love through physical affection, obviously. So, this person's idea of a good date night might be, cuddling on the couch, watching a movie, slow dancing together, a lot of physical contact. And that's what, say, for example, holding their hand. This is where they feel most loved.
And even secure.
When physically interacting with their partner.
The next one is acts of service. I know my best friend, this is her love language. And I see it a lot when I'm with her. And she's my best friend. She's not my partner by any means. But I feel like some of these apply to, like, friendships as well.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say that, for sure. So, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Acts of service are nice things you do for your partner that make them feel loved and appreciated, such as helping with the dishes, running errands, vacuuming, or, like, putting gas in the car. If your partner's main love language is acts of service, they'll notice and appreciate little things you do for them, and they tend to perform little acts of service and kindness for others too.
Yes. And then the last one would be receiving gifts.
I used to think this one would be, like, vain. Like, I like it when you buy me things.
And I actually think that too, and that's why I thought I don't think I'm a receiving gifts type of person.
I recently learned that I think I am.
I think I might be.
Because I love putting efforts into creating little tiny gifts for people.
Me too. I put a lot of effort into gifts when I make stuff. I love writing, and this is why I also think words of affirmation and is another one, although I think the way I give love versus receive love is different.
Okay.
So, like, I'm very giving. I like doing acts of service for people. I like giving them gifts and writing them, like, Sophia knows I write long letters. Like,
really long letters.
Everybody who's really close to me has probably gotten an essay long letter. Like, it's a joke amongst all my friends. They're like, oh, where's my essay? Like, when it's their birthday. Because I just, that's the way I pour my love out. I like to say thank you for all the things that you've done for me, and you're the sweetest, and da-da-da-da-da. But, I don't think I receive it the same way. So if you are someone who likes receiving gifts, if you resonate with this, they treasure not only the gift itself, but the time and effort the gift giver put into selecting it. When you take the time to pick out a gift specifically for them, it tells them that you are thoughtful and really know and care about them and their preferences. People with this love language can often remember every little gift they have received from their loved ones because it makes such an impact on them. And I think I resonate with that in certain ways, because I think while I was in my relationship, I did really appreciate the meaningful gifts, and I made such meaningful gifts.
I agree. I feel like I remember, like, every single trinket I was given, and I have, like, all of them in, like, a little special place.
Right. And like, the backstory behind it. Like, when you get something from a loved one, it holds a special place because there's, like, an attachment to it from a certain, I want to say, like, event or something. So I guess we also kind of told you how to identify it. So go ahead.
There are a couple questions you can ask yourself.
Yes.
So in a relationship, do you feel more loved when your partner tells you, I love you, or praises something you did?
I think I love you is better, because I just like hearing it.
Absolutely. What about surprises you with a meaningful gift?
I do like that. I think I would actually like that.
Plans a trip just for the two of you?
See, this is hard because I could say, like, yeah to all of these, and that's why I'm like, I always thought I was like a quality, I definitely know I'm a quality time person, but then I was like, I don't know if it's words of affirmation or, like, physical touch that comes next to it. And I think coming out of this relationship, I'm actually kind of learning more, because I'm learning what I miss.
Yes, I feel that a lot. Okay. Moving on.
Yeah.
Running the errands or doing the laundry, and then also holding your hand while you're walking. I love hand holding.
Me too.
Love hand holding.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even, like, I like, this is gonna sound weird, like, physical touch between friends, that's so tricky. But, like, the friends that you lean on, like, literally lean on, like, you can tell, like, you're close with, and it's just, like, You know, for me, I like having that like physical support because it feels like as if it is really there and it gives me
Yes.
something tangible to look at.
I also love being that physical support.
Me too. And then let's move into why does it matter?
So, love languages promote selflessness, create empathy, aid personal growth, and help you share love in meaningful ways. To
Yeah.
touch on selflessness, loving someone the way they want to be loved or loving someone using their love language, I feel like is super important when it comes to understanding like who they are as a person and making sure they understand that you do love them and you
Yeah.
understand them.
Yeah. You know, like you're putting in that
Yeah,
effort
you're putting
to
in that effort.
and that, you know, commitment to them. And I think that's something really special that when your partner says like, yeah, I'll do something, you know, even if it's not really their forte, they'll try anyway. And I think effort is something that I is also really important. You know, they might not be good at it. Like say like, you know, your partner's not really a giving gifts, receiving gifts type person, and you know, they don't get you the perfect gift, but you know, they got you a gift and because they know you like receiving gifts. The effort was there, the effort was made.
Absolutely.
And you definitely have to appreciate the effort that was made, not just the fact that you might not like the gift.
They also, that I feel like plays into empathy. And so, to add on to that, it also aids personal growth.
Yeah. And it just, I feel like, you know, listening to the other person like evolves who you are. And this kind of can help you come out of like a codependent relationship because you're listening to each other versus, you know, just going off of whatever. And even any unhealthy relationship, if you take the time to say, to tell the other person, and this is why communication again is key, you have to, if you feel you can't go to the person and tell them how you feel and say, hey, I want to work on this and fix this, it's not really going to work. And one of the things that I used to like to do was do check ins. And he would do them with me, and that honestly made me feel really appreciated because he wasn't the type of person who would want to do that. But the fact that he took it upon himself to say, yes, I'll do these and I'll take them seriously and I'll try, meant a lot to me because he wasn't that type of person. And I would always be like, you know, so for example, a check-in, which I really like this idea. You know, you could say what are some things, you know, maybe past week, day, month, whatever increment of time you want to use that made you feel loved. What made you feel not loved and unappreciated? What do you think we can work on? What do you think we have a handle of? And then just, you know, any other questions that can kind of help you get a feel for where your partner is at, I think is really helpful.
Absolutely. I think we already touched on help you share love in meaningful ways.
Yeah. So I think the main takeaway would be, you know, if you're seeing yourself fall into like codependent or just a toxic relationship in general, how much of it can you take, especially, you know, if you're in an abusive or an unsafe environment, get out, definitely, for sure. I know that's hard, but take that step. But also communication, effort, and compromise are key, and so are boundaries. So know where you lie, and you, at the end of the day, you are your own individual people that come together to form, not like, I don't want to say two parts of a whole because you're your own person, but
to form a bond.
Form a bond and form a better whole, form a like a unit, a group of people who care about each other, put effort,
make compromises.
Yeah, definitely. Compromise and boundaries are key, and so is effort and communication.
Absolutely. So that pretty much wraps up our tea journal for this week. Welcome back to Not My Cup of Tea.
To recap, this segment is basically a glorified would you rather regarding a topic and two options.
For today, we'll be sticking with our navigating relationships theme and talking about siding with your friends versus siding with your partner.
Okay, so to start, let's talk about what to do when you want to side with your friends. So
go ahead. I feel like your friends tend to be a bigger group with a lot more people in it. So this might possibly be the easier side to take. I feel like you have a lot of people backing you. You have a lot of information coming at you as to why they're right because there's so many people and so many different opinions.
Right.
And so you really need to have open communication and honest communication with your partner to be able to talk to them about why you think they're right
Mm-hmm.
and how you don't want that to change your relationship.
Yeah. I think you also have to take into account how long you've known this friend versus how long you've been with your partner.
Absolutely.
So, like, I was friends with this one person, and then I got with my partner, and they were there before my partner. You know, they were my support system there before this person. And he said something that hurt her, and I'm not going to side with him because this was a very black and white situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you hurt her, apologize to her. That's not okay. You know, my friends are important to me too. And I think that's something that's in any good relationship. You should also support your partner having friends and nurturing their relationship with their friends.
Absolutely.
Because that is still really important. You know, those are still important people in their lives.
And honestly, I don't think you should stop your partner from having, like, friends of the opposite gender because
that goes along with trust.
Yeah, and also if they're going to cheat regardless of whether you allow them to have friends like that.
Yeah. So I think that's where it's trust. And then if you start seeing them do something and you're like, hey, I don't like that you're doing that, that's where you got to keep that communication line open.
And set those boundaries, healthy boundaries.
And also see how they react to that comment. And then, so like, basically to go back with siding with your friends, if you've been friends with this person longer, however, and you do agree with your friend, you have to, you know, I think you go to your partner and say, you know, I unfortunately, like, or not even unfortunately, I agree with my friend, and, you know, I ask that you respect my opinion, and that if you want to talk more about this and understand where I'm coming from, you know, I'm here to talk about it and keep that communication line open.
Absolutely.
I think if you go vice versa and you want to side with your partner, that can be hard.
That can be hard because you're, like, for example, going against a bigger group of people.
Right. And sometimes it's not even a bigger group of people.
But someone who you might have known for a long time.
And I think, you know, I think it's hard when you side with your friend because, you know, your partner wants to be like, you know, but you're my partner, you're supposed to support there and be there for me. And I think that's where you have to, again, keep that communication line. But when you side with your partner and your friend, that's hard too, because if you've known them longer, it's like, I don't want to say like your loyalty lies with me, because your loyalty lies with both of them.
Absolutely.
But it's
situation
hard.
based.
It's very situation based.
People based.
And I think you have to, like, you know, I think you have to respect both people and take that into account, you know. So if we were to say like a would you rather, so let's think of like a certain situation that might not be so black and white.
Okay.
You know, I would say, okay, well, Sophia's birthday is when we're releasing this. So say it's your birthday, right?
Okay.
Say, you know, okay, your partner gets you a gift, right? But so does your friend, and you like your friend's gift better. However, your partner put so much effort into this gift. So, you know, you're like, oh, thank you so much, you got me this gift. But the friend is like, I got you what you really wanted, you know?
Oh, and they're blunt about it.
And they're blunt. They're like, well, like, in their mind, they're like, I got you what you really wanted. Why aren't you giving me, like, the same appreciation as you're giving your partner? And so, you know, they're kind of hurt. But you want to side with your partner and say, you know,
put in the effort.
They put in the effort, like,
they knew that I like gift giving.
Right. And, like, you know, yeah, let's say, like, you know, you like gift giving and they put in the effort. And even if you don't, they put in the effort.
Right.
To get something you like. Depending on, I don't want to say the type of friend, depending on who this friend is and their personality, how they react, would you rather, you know, I guess, like, if you want to really appreciate, would you rather side with your partner and say, you know, thank you so much, and show them a higher level of appreciation, or go with your friend and show them a higher level of appreciation because they got what you wanted?
I feel like in this scenario, I would probably try to stay neutral and give them similar levels of appreciation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think privately, you can give your partner more appreciation.
Thank you so much for like loving me the way I like to be loved.
Right.
It's nice of you to do that, even though you're
Putting
not
effort.
inclined to do that.
Right. Putting in that effort, all of that. And, but that's really hard. And seeing, like, say your friend sees it and they're like, you were so excited about my gift, and now you're like, do you not like it as much? Like, and that insecurity comes out. What do you do in that situation? Like, would you want to defend yourself, or would you kind of accept it and say, yeah, hey, I'm sorry, but I do really like your gift?
I think you can, like, not the word accept, but what's the word? Like,
I don't know. I feel like I know where you're going with this, though. Oh, okay. Wait. Validation?
yes.
Okay. So,
like, I feel like you can start by validating your friends' like emotions and
yeah,
saying, I see where that's coming from, and then you can explain yourself and the situation. And if your friends, like, if you have healthy and open communication with this friend, they should know that, like, this
agreed.
is okay. It's
And
understandable.
I feel like if you're friends, like, they should be able to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if someone said blatantly something mean, then that's a little easier to pick a side and be like, no, you said something hurtful. Regardless, like, say, even if it's true, the approach, say, you said something hurtful, no, please apologize to them because I care about this person as well.
Absolutely.
You should not, that's not what you do. You don't say something mean.
Yeah.
So, like, that's a very black and white situation, whereas this one, I feel like it's not as black and white, and it's harder, and I definitely feel like I could come up with a better example, but I can't.
Yep.
So, but I think to wrap it up, I think if you, depending on the situation, if it's black and white, siding with the person that you morally agree with is definitely good.
And then bringing it up in a respectful way, and not in a way where you're like, you're wrong, you're mean. But, like, it was hurtful to them, or it was hurtful to me when you said this. And which my aunt talked about in our 3rd episode about nonviolent communication. I feel like that plays a lot into this.
And then keeping that communication line with the opposite party open as well, so that they can better understand where you're coming from, and hopefully you guys are able to move past this situation and still have a hopefully stronger relationship.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so that's the end of Not My Cup of Tea. Thank you so much for listening to our 10th episode.
I hope you'll join us next week on Sip and Spill.